Let's say that you have a label and you want that label to be inside of a scroll view because the label is going to be more than the height of the screen of the device that you're working on. How would you do that? Let's take a look. Let's put a scroll view into a completely empty project here. And I'm going to set up some constraints here. I'm going to say 0, -15, and 0. And I'm going to add these three as constraints. Now, there's one other constraint that I want to add here. I want the width of this to be equal to this view. So I'm going to control drag this, and I'm going to say equal widths. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to update my frames. Boom, look at that. Looks really nice. Next, let's introduce a label. So we have this label here. I'm just going to drag it over here. Now, there's a few properties I want to change. I want it to have multi-line, and I specify that by setting that from a 1 to a 0. And then instead of truncating trail, let's say we want it to be word wrap. And then instead of this, I've got some libsum here that I'm just going to throw in. Okay, look at that. Now, you can't really see much of it yet, which is because we need to give it some more constraints. So what do we give this guy? Well, let's be sure that we have it selected first. Importantly, by the way, let's take a look at this. See how I've introduced some problems here because of this label. So if I don't have this label here, see, problems all go away. If I have a label, we have problems. So if I come here and I select this, then I can come and add some constraints. So for this one, I want the top, leading, and bottom to be 15 and the trailing to be 0. So 15, 15, 15, 0. Let's also update the frames on this so you can have an idea of what that should look like. But you'll notice that there's 3 distinct paragraphs that I copied here from lorem ipsum, and they are wrapping long ways because the width of them is actually extremely long. So there's a few other things we want to do here before we're done. So first of all, we want the trailing space to the view to be 0. And what I mean by that is control drag from here to this view, not the super view, but the actual parent view of the controller. We want this one to be 0. We want the trailing space to be 0. So let's go ahead and select that. Let's make sure that it actually understands it to be 0. It doesn't. It understands it to be -5,000 because it's going past it, -5,000. It also zoomed its way out. So we want to be sure and make that 0. And while we're at it, let's zoom in back to 100%. Look at that. Things are already starting to look more like how we want them to. So by the way, let's go ahead and load this up in our simulator, see what this looks like. I have an iPhone 7 here. Let's see what we got. Look at that. It's looking really, really good. I like that a lot. So some of the things that we did there were probably non-obvious, which is why I made this screencast. Let's build on this idea of auto constraints inside a UIScrollView by adding a button. Now, we want this button to be at the very bottom of this label. And it's very important when I drag it over here that I drag it not up here, but down here. And by the way, you'll notice that little line there. It becomes important here in a second, and I'll show you why. Now, the first thing, though, is that we want to go to this constraint here, and this bottom space to super view is something that we want to get rid of because we need to have room for the button. It's the button that should have the bottom space to super view. So we're going to delete that. Of course, it introduces a constraint error here. Ambiguous scrollable content. Scrollable content, by the way, is the total height of this scroll view. Now, how do we fix that? Well, a few things. First of all, let's take this and we'll control drag this to this and we'll set vertical spacing. And this is where what I was talking about is really important in terms of where you drag your newly desired label or control onto your view controller. Because it says top space to lorem ipsum. If we had put this up here, it would say bottom space to lorem ipsum, meaning it thinks that you want this to be on top of the label. And as far as I know, there's not a way to undo that. So where you drag it's important. Anyway, let's hit edit. And let's say instead of a negative number like this, let's make it 30. And then we'll add 2 more constraints. We want to have a 15 for our leading, and for our bottom, Let's go ahead and do 30. Okay, we'll go here, we'll update for frames, and then we'll go ahead and recompile and open up our simulator here and see what we got. And look at that, big as day. We have a good old button here. A little bit more than 15 pixels here, but that's because of the spacing of the final paragraph. So yeah, looking really good here. And now we have 2 elements inside the scroll view. You could extend this and add as many as you need to, and everything should be very easy from here.